What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another Pioneer video, and today I'm going to be bringing you a match that I played with the Lotus Field deck, showing off the deck that we had looked at on Tuesday. So I will have the deck list linked in the description down below here, and you can check out the video on Tuesday as well for a more in-depth deck tech of the Lotus Field deck. Of course, before we get too deep into this mini deck tech that I'm going to give you, just kind of giving you the important bits and information to know before going into the match, please consider subscribing to the channel and ring the notification bell so you know when future videos get posted. And in the description down below, like I said, I will have the deck list linked down there, as well as a link to my Discord server. Feel free to follow that link and join over there as well. So, Lotus Field combo for Pioneer. We're essentially looking to abuse this card. Lotus Field comes into play tapped. You have to sacrifice 2 lands. You can have 3 mana of any one color, and it has hexproof, so your opponent's not going to be able to blow it up with, you know, their demolition fields and the Field of Ruins and any other, and like Besaiges as well. So there's definitely a lot of risk to playing this card because of the nature of you having to sacrifice lands and essentially come ahead, you know, even. But we are going to abuse this card by playing cards like Hidden Strings and Pour Over the Pages. Hidden Strings is kind of like what you'll hear this deck referred to as well as being Lotus Field combo. It can essentially tap or untap 2 target permanents, and it ciphers, but the cipher isn't really like super necessary. It like comes up very rarely, if at all. So with Hidden Strings, you can, you know, untap Lotus Field with Hidden Strings, and it ends up netting mana. So just even with tapping 1 Lotus Field and casting a Hidden Strings and only untapping it, you generate 1 mana. But if you have 2 Lotus Fields in play, or if you have like a Lotus Field and a like Vizier of Tumbling Sands, you are able to generate even more mana, netting up to 4. Getting 2 Lotus Fields into play seems like it's kind of a tall task to ask, because you're going to have to play this land, sacrifice 2 lands, and then get 2 more lands in play and sacrifice 2 more lands to play another one. And sometimes that will come up, you know, if games go long enough, your opponent just isn't putting an adequate enough clock on you, but they've disrupted you enough. That can happen, but one of the easiest ways to do it is to play a card like Thespian Stage, which copies a land, and except it gains the ability to then copy additional lands. So Thespian Stage comes in as a Thespian Stage. You can tap the Lotus Field for mana and tap the Thespian Stage to copy the Lotus Field, and you do not get the Lotus Field trigger to sacrifice lands because the land is already in play, and this is one of the easier ways that you can then start, you know, casting Hidden Strings and untapping your lands. We have Pour Over the Pages, which is going to draw 3 cards, untap up to 2 lands, and then discard a card. It's going to kind of fuel both sides of the strategy, where we have Leer, where we can flash back instant and sorcery cards by paying their mana cost. We untap our lands, you know, with Lotus Field, so then you actually end up generating a single mana from Pour Over the Pages when you cast them. In order to kind of like get to this position where we can get a Lotus Field in a Thespian Stage, or even 2 Lotus Fields, we need to have some ways to kind of like ramp ourselves into it, because obviously doing it, you know, as like a turn 5, turn 6 combo deck in a format that has been fairly aggressive with things like Boros aggro and even Amalia combo getting a win on turn 3, and is it Phoenix decks and so on. We need to figure out a way to actually ramp into this strategy relatively quickly. So we have cards like Arboreal Grazer that are going to put lands from our hands directly onto the battlefield and get us to playing turn 2 Lotus Fields. Archdruid's Charm can go search for a creature or land, and if it's a land, you put it on the battlefield tapped. Otherwise, you put it into your hand and then shuffle. This has some utility of getting some of our good creatures, something like a Dragonlord Dramoka. We have like Fave Wishes, which is like another card that we can get off of casting our big payoff for generating all this mana. Can also find our missing piece of either a Lotus Field or a Thespian Stage as well. It actually sets us up to where if we Arboreal Grazer on 1, we can play a 3rd producing green land to cast our Archdruid's Charm on turn 2, put a Lotus Field into play, sack 2 lands, untap, and if we play Thespian Stage, we are able to tap the Lotus Field and the Thespian Stage to copy Lotus Field, and then we have an untapped mana with 1 mana floating, to where we can cast Hidden Strings, untap our Lotus Fields, and then we have access to 6 mana, and we're kind of off to the races. The big payoff for this deck, Emergent Ultimatum. Search your library for 3 monocolored cards with different names, you exile them, an opponent chooses one of those cards and shuffles into your library, and you cast the others without paying its mana cost. Typically, you're going to see something like Leer, Dark Petition, like Omniscience, and you're able to kind of, you know, go from there. And most of the time they kind of like shuffle in Omniscience, and you're left with like Dark Petition, Leer, and if you've been casting, you know, Pour Over the Pages and things like that, you're going to be able to just flash them back, get access to more cards, you're going to look at more cards, you're going to generate more mana. Hidden Strings is going to generate a ton of mana, and you're essentially looking for something like Omniscience or the other Emergent Ultimatum in the deck even getting to this Fae of Wishes to go to our sideboard, to which then one of our win conditions is Approach of the Second Sun. We cast it. If it's the first time we cast it, we gain 7 life. And if we resolve it for a second time, we end up winning the game, which is kind of easy to do when we're looking at cards like Dark Petition to search our library for a card, put it in our hand. Fae Wish is going to go get us the card. We have other Emergent Ultimatums that we can go get. We even have an Emergent Ultimatum in the sideboard as well that we can search for off of our Fae Wishes if our opponent gets rid of all of them. And we have some other utility pieces in the sideboard as well. We have Unauthorized Exit to get rid of annoying permanents that might stop us from drawing extra cards. Can get us out from under like Dampening Spheres and things like that. So yeah, that is the deck in a nutshell. It went a little bit longer than I expected to, but it is what it is. I want to make sure that you guys kind of understand what is going on as we get into the games and stuff. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get over to the match and check out game number 1. So here we are for game 1. We are on the play. This is the hand that we kept. It has everything that we want. We essentially have the combo in hand. We're starting a Vizier. We have Archdruid's Charm. We have quite a few things that we can do here. We can lead on like the tap land, and then we can play a Botanical Sanctum, and if we draw like a 2-mana spell, we're able to play it. If not, like turn 3, we are able to play a Lotus Field off of these lands, cycle the Vizier, and untap it, and leave up Archdruid's Charm. So this hand does have a little bit of something. Dragonlord Jamoka being the one of in our deck, a little awkward that we have it in our opening hand, but if we end up playing against a control deck, it's going to pull a little bit of weight here. So end up playing, our opponent mulligans to 5, which is very unfortunate, but does bode very well for us considering we do have a relatively fast starting hand. But we start on the Zagat Triome, pass the turn. Our opponent plays a Watery Grave untapped, Thought Seizes us, takes our Archdruid's Charm, which is probably the best card in our hand. We already have like the combo set up. So like Archdruid's Charm is just going to be able to search up potentially Vizier, Tumbling Sands, go and get our Fae of Wishes. Could even go get our Leer as well. We're going to be able to more than likely cast it. Like I said, we're going to be able to go and get it, and then Thespian Stage and whatnot. So kind of whatever they thought seized it. A little annoying, but it is what it is. We end up drawing Grazer. This is going to allow us to float some mana and just immediately get this Lotus Field into play. Not knowing exactly what they're on, we can probably gather that they're like blue-black control or whatever, but we don't want to kind of expose ourselves by playing like this Thespian Stage. They know that we have Lotus Field. At least if we get Lotus Field in play, they're not going to be able to target it and blow it up. And Thespian Stage is going to come down and immediately activate to copy the Lotus Field if our opponent chooses to do nothing with it. So we untap, or they untap, excuse me. They play their second land and say go. We draw another Thespian Stage. It's not like the absolute greatest, but we can just end up having tons of mana in play. Opponent Fatal Push Grazer doesn't really do much. Probably doesn't really have anything else going on. We're looking to copy here and end up passing the turn. We draw Dark Petition. We're going to play just Dragonlord. If they can't do anything on their turn, if they go to their turn, tap out, and kill this, we have access to Dark Petition. Unfortunately, not Spell Mastery yet, but we do kind of have ways where we can, cycle this Vizier. We end up drawing, we draw a card, cycle Vizier, draw another card, potentially find another spell to get Spell Mastery with his Dark Petition and kind of start going off from there. So, unfortunately, that was game 1. Our opponent missed a few land drops, and as a control deck, they're definitely pretty far behind, especially if they don't have a removal spell for the Dragonlord Jamoka. While this isn't going to necessarily end the game fairly quickly, it's going to be over the course of 4 turns. Opponent more than likely is going to be able to draw out of this and kill it, but we're just going to end up stocking up on so many cards, and the turn that they are able to kill it, they're going to probably tap pretty low and have a hard time beating us. So that's game 1. Let's go ahead and jump over to game number 2. So here we are for game number 2. This hand we ended up mulliganing down to 6. We put an Odo Word at the bottom, but we are looking at 2 lands. We have 2 impulses. We have a Pour Over the Pages, Dark Petition. We're essentially hoping that our opponent doesn't absolutely just rip apart our hand. They did keep 7. So like with this hand, we're essentially looking for kind of everything. We could probably mulligan to 5, but I don't like mulliganing too low against Thoughtseize decks. In our other hand, we had like Omniscience and Leer in our hand, so it was essentially like a mull to 5. So I was kind of okay with that. But this like impulse is, theoretically with all the draw steps and at least having like 1 impulse, we should be pretty good to find either like a Sylvan Scrying to go find a Lotus Field, find an actual Lotus Field, or anything of that nature to kind of forward us towards getting our lands into play to win the game. So our opponent's on the play. They lead on Fabled Passage. We end up drawing a Lair of the Hydra, so we can play Lair, we can play Botanical Sanctum, hopefully Impulse, and even find like an Archdruid's Charm, and then we can, definitely at least make it harder for our opponent. They did not crack the Fabled Passage on my turn, or my end of turn, so that kind of gives us an extra window. We find the Thespian Stage, so essentially we're just looking for a Lotus Field. With that pile of cards, we had like a Silence in there. Get rid of this. So we had like a Silence and stuff in there that I believe that's typically like we'd see for like against like control decks. It's like we play it and our opponent either has to respond to it, by like countering it and then being able to leave up like other counters, but chances are they are not going to be able to do so. So go there. Our second turn, whatever, we Impulse. We got the Temple of Mystery. That's fine. It give us some extra looks. They play an Argos Bloodfast, so this is some kind of like grindy, like black control deck or like blue-black control deck. We're just going to keep doing our thing. We find an Emergent Ultimatum, so we're going to have something to do with a ton of mana. And with this here, we're going to be able to Grazer, put this Temple into play, get some Scry action, put that to the bottom, because again, we're just really looking for an Emergent, or not Emergent Ultimatum. The Unmoored Egos, they get Emergent Ultimatum. Unfortunate, so then they end up getting it. We draw a Hidden Strings, draw Botanical Sanctum. We play the Thespian Stage untapped, because at this point, we're kind of, up against it. We are probably going to we are going to cast this Pour Over the Pages and kind of hope to find something out of this, which we find like a Sylvan Scrying, so we end up casting the Scrying. We're going to go get a Lotus Field, and we're actually going to be able to play Lotus Field and then copy Lotus Field with Thespian Stage to make a ton of mana. And this is kind of where, things get a little bit harder with Narset Part of the Veils. If we waited a turn, we could have probably guessed that they were like some kind of like Narset deck. Narset isn't typically like a normally played card, at least I don't think so, but it is particularly good here, maybe coming in from like the sideboard, potentially, a main board, one or two copies. But this makes life a little bit difficult because now we just can't, get Leer and start casting Pour Over the Pages and getting card advantage and then putting other cards in our graveyard or what have you. It gets a little bit more difficult. And they leave a black man open, they Thoughtseize us, they take our Dark Petition, and we're left with virtually nothing. We're going to have a ton of mana, and that's really it. We have this Triome now, so we play our lands, we sack these, and then we copy Lotus Field with the... or we copy Thespian Stage with the Lotus Field. Thespian Stage with Lotus Field? Whatever. So then they find Liliana Walker of the Dead, or Waker of the Dead. Each opponent discards a card. We don't really need this Temple, whatever. I guess we're forced to discard to that, so we couldn't just not discard. It's not like Obnixilis, where you can either discard the card or take the damage. So here, I don't want this Waker of the Dead to get too crazy. I'd imagine that we'd have a pretty hard time actually beating this. So I actually attack the Liliana here while they only have blue mana open. Play the Triome and say go. They have Liliana, of course, so put a little bit more pressure on our hand. I want to kind of hold on to this Silence, because eventually our opponent's going to start activating this Argos Bloodfast. They do have a Castle Locthwain in play. They know that we have these two cards. Archdruid's Charm, at least to me, it doesn't seem like it's going to do a whole lot at the time. Obviously, probably would have been worth keeping it to go get Fave Wishes, but it kind of is what it is. Our opponent leaves up 2 mana. I want to make sure that I can, play this Lotus Field and whatever. So we end up just activating for 4, going to kill Liliana, no reason to try to overkill it. They have Drown in the Loch, they have 1 card in hand, we end up getting rid of our other lands and passing the turn. So far, I looking back on it, have played a pretty sloppy game. They have a Silence, they, Liliana discard, it's not looking good. We have a Hidden Strings. I decide that I'm going to copy this Castle Locthwain and then cast this Hidden Strings, because this is going to allow us to draw a card on our opponent's turn through their Narset. And we're kind of okay with doing that because we're going to, we're going to go to 19 after activating it. And, this Liliana potentially just activating on the next turn, they re-up on their Narset, find another one. Each player discards a card, whatever, passes the turn, we're going to draw a card, find another Strings. And so from here, it's interesting. All right, so we're going to end up casting this Hidden Strings, untapping these lands. Like at this point, we're kind of having to go for it. So, we untap these. We have 4 blue mana. We can tap a Lotus Field for black mana, and we can go and search our library. We're gonna get 3 black mana back, so we get Leer. We have a Lotus Field untap. We have 3 Hidden Strings in our graveyard. We have Dark Petition and Dark Petition, so we can go search for some things. We could even use Pour Over the Pages as like a pretty bad, like Hidden Strings to like net a single mana. So we have like, we're gonna get 1 mana from like the first Hidden Strings, and then the rest of these are gonna produce 4. And we have like Archdruid's Charm, where we can go search for things. So like we have some action. We are definitely not dead in this game. We just have to figure out how to get this Narset off the board, and we can really go off. So cast a Hidden Strings, float some mana. Then we're going to go and get a Dark Petition. Go get a Fave Wishes. We're going to start casting Hidden Strings to kind of start netting some mana. And then just to make sure that we can actually go and do our thing. So we go and get Emergent Ultimatum. And I did not realize this when I had cast the Emergent Ultimatum, that I had screwed up. And there's actually a card in the sideboard that I was like hoping to go get. And it was the Unauthorized Exit. I had left it in the sideboard, so we could have fade to get this instead of getting the Emergent Ultimatum, bounce the Narset, and then kind of started to go off. So at this point, I'm like, I have made a very bad mistake. We have Pour Over the Pages, we have Hidden Strings. Essentially, we're gonna kind of get like a bad, ritual here from like the Pour Over the Pages. So we cast the other cards. We untap. We Pour Over the Pages to untap our lands, and then we float the mana with the Hidden Strings on the stack, and then we do this. So then I'm like, okay, what are we going to do? Well, we can go Tutor for an Otawara. We still have Spell Mastery. We're going to go down to... this is going to cost 3 to do it instead of 4 because of our Leer. So we're going to be able to go down to, I believe I went down to like 1 black, like 1 and 1, no, 1 and 2. So bounce an Narset, and then we're able to kind of go off to the raises, Pour Over the Pages. We find another Pour Over the Pages. And from here, we're just going to continue to cast Pours, and then we're going to be able to recast them from our graveyard. We have Omniscience, so we're going to end up being able to net enough mana to where we can put this Omniscience into play. We can Pour Over the Pages. We're going to be able to cast the cards in our hand for free. Eventually, we're going to be able to get back this Fave Wishes, discard it, go and get a Approach from our sideboard, cast the Approach with the Omniscience, and then, just keep casting Pours and Impulses until... we find it and then cast it for free again. So while we have massively screwed up, we played a pretty bad game 2 overall, with just some of the other decisions and lines and stuff that we could have taken. And ultimately, it didn't matter just because we were still able to find outs and find ways to actually get through to the finish line and mess with our opponent. I did the... Tutor play, and that was a mistake because we did have a Sylvan Scrying in our graveyard, so we could have just Sylvan Scrying back for the Otawara instead and just saved us a little bit more mana. We ended up essentially spending 2 mana anyway because we got 3 black mana from the ritual or from the Tutor, but we definitely didn't need to spend the Tutor because then we could have just made it a little bit easier for us to go and get our win condition after we've already cast it. Ultimately, it wasn't going to matter. At this point, like, we have enough fuel and everything to where we could have, continued to go off and win the game that way. Heck, we could even, like, have this Castle Locthwain, like, copy, like, Lotus Field again. Even though, like, it doesn't really, like, matter too much, we could even, like, have this Castle Locthwain, draw a card, and then, kind of go from there. But... yeah, that was the Lotus Field deck, kind of showing off what it's able to do. Our opponent definitely played hard and had basically the game all but won on the next turn. And we started the game with our turn with 2 Lotus Fields, a Castle Locthwain, and our Arboreal Grazer, and we have 7 mana in our pool, a Pour Over the Pages, Omniscience, and a ton of fuel in our graveyard for our Leer as well. So, if that doesn't show you the power of the Lotus Field deck and how it can just kind of win out of nowhere, especially in a game like this where it was an absolute slobber knocker. Our opponent was like ripping cards out of our hand, taking up Liliana's, having a bunch of Planeswalkers to deal with and everything. We definitely didn't do ourselves any favors, and yet we were not punished. So you love to see it. But yeah, that is the Lotus Field combo deck for Pioneer. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like on the video. Comment down below what decks you'd like to see next. If you're not already subscribed to the channel and you want to support my content, please consider subscribing and ring the notification bell so you know when future videos get posted. Go into the description down below. You'll find a link to the deck as well as a link to the Discord server. So if you want to join over there, talk about Magic, anything like that, feel free to do so. I would really appreciate it. And that's going to do it for me. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next one.